The first thing, an occupation, when you have a revolution in the country, the first thing you take over is the radio. And then you start telling the people, everybody, the war is over. And so all of them surrender. No, they believe that thing right there. And once they take that over, they start telling you where you are and where they are, and you fall right in line. It's plain thought control.
Welcome to Cycles. In this series, I will explain different planetary cycles and how they correlate to stages of development in humanity through technology, culture, beliefs, values, religion, invention, conflicts, and more. One of my favorite uses for astrology is looking at history and noticing the trends in culture and society and how they correlate to different planetary transits. I focus mainly on American culture and history simply because that is what I know the best. But the same ideas I talk about apply worldwide. The Neptune Pluto cycle, starting at their conjunction, correlates with the start of a new 500-year cycle of influence over collective consciousness, collective cultural patterns, perceptions of social reality, ideals, collective deceptions, propaganda, and cultural and societal narratives. What is acceptable by society can be heavily dictated by media through the amount of attention it receives.
Know that the boundaries between media industries are blurring. For a person who's not interested in going into media, it's still terribly important to understand media industries because these are the organizations that create an environment of symbols that surround us. Most of what we talk about every day, most of what we see about the world every day is filtered through media. It's filtered through companies that basically construct worlds for us. It's not like these worlds are not true, but the worlds are constructed because of constraints, because of rewards that companies get, because of concerns that they have that are out there and that we have to know, we have to understand in order to be able to say, hey, we're not going to totally be pawns of a world we know nothing about.
The conjunction between any two planets is the start of their cycle together. Depending on the planets involved, it will determine the length of the cycle. With Neptune and Pluto, I will be focusing on the conjunction mainly, due to the length of their cycle together. So why do I say Neptune and Pluto here with mass media? Well, collective consciousness is Neptune's domain. The collective beliefs, ideals, illusions, higher spiritual and philosophical values, artistic expression. It is the things that we all tap into, regardless of our individual self, our ego. We are all one in Neptune's domain. This can be positive or negative. Mass media is the means with which we influence the collective conscious. I hear what you were saying. Isn't Mercury the conscious mind? Isn't Mercury media? And yes, Mercury is facts and information. It is the act of speaking. It is the intellect. And yes, our beliefs and the worldviews we have, our Neptune, affect our Mercury, and vice versa. But we use our intellect, Mercury, to rationalize our beliefs, to learn facts about the world to kind of justify what we believe and feel. We find facts that confirm our beliefs. Where do our beliefs and narratives we tell ourselves about the world come from? That is Neptune's domain. Collective beliefs shape our perceptions, our interpretations of reality. Yes, reality itself is Saturn, but our beliefs and perceptions about it are Neptune. We try, usually poorly, to shape reality, to be more in line with our interpretations and beliefs about it. Pluto adds power to the planet it aspects and the sign that it is in. Power in the best and worst expressions, as well as resources, corruption and manipulation, transformations and change, and a primal subconscious necessity. As Richard Tarnas says, Pluto compels, empowers, and intensifies whatever it touches. The movement of Pluto through a sign will highlight the things that sign rules and bring them up, both good and bad. Neptune and Pluto together are the power to hold our attention and alter our perception, both individually and especially collectively. Here we can see how this shows mass media. Neptune is our perceptions, our beliefs, higher values. Pluto adds a level of power and intensity to it. The conjunction of Neptune and Pluto starts a new cycle of collective perception and power. And who dictates it? Usually it is those with the resources. The most recent Neptune-Pluto conjunction coincided with the Second Industrial Revolution and a massive expansion of the, quote, global community through material and economic means and improvements of all kinds to quality of life. Beginning with the conjunction of Pluto and Neptune, in and around 1891, we see a rapid development of different forms of mass media, which have influenced humanity more and more over the century. Film, magazines, radio, television, video games, computers, internet, mobile devices, and digital media in general. Mass media is the diverse array of media technologies that reach a large audience via mass communication. The organizations that control these technologies, such as movie studios, publishing companies, and TV and radio stations, are also considered mass media. Roughly 90% of all mass media, including radio broadcast networks and programming, video news, sports entertainment, and other media, are owned by 6 major companies. According to the Morris Creative Group, these 6 companies made over $200 billion in revenue in 2010, and they are the elites which have the power to control the narrative of stories and alter people's beliefs, which is very, very much Pluto and Neptune. It's the power to control the narrative of stories and alter people's beliefs.
False news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets aren't true without checking facts first. Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Mass media is both the physical devices, the owners, but also the ever-changing narratives and values that they portray. Mass media messages can lead to measurable social effects. Mass media plays a significant role in shaping public perceptions on a variety of important issues, both through the information that is dispensed through them and through the interpretations they place upon this information. They play a large role in shaping modern culture. Mass media sources, through theories like framing and agenda setting, can affect the scope of a story as particular facts and information are highlighted or omitted. This can directly correlate with how individuals may perceive certain groups of people, for example, as the only media coverage a person receives can be very limited and may not reflect the whole story or situation. Stories are often covered to reflect a particular perspective or to target a specific demographic. Each cycle builds upon the previous ones, and in our case, the last time Pluto and Neptune were conjunct was in and around 1398, the exact same time that the beginning of circulated media was happening in Europe. Johannes Huss also started questioning and pushing back against the established narratives and beliefs of the church in his area, leading to the Hussites and later inspiring Martin Luther and Protestants. Within 40 years of the conjunction of Neptune and Pluto, the first printing press was invented, profoundly shaping the next 500 years. Media in its various forms has always been around with human beings, stories, art, etc. But a change to mass media and a change to a large distribution of ideas powerfully shaped humanity and Europe at the time. The Reformation, Scientific Revolution, and the Enlightenment occurred in this cycle, thanks in part to mass media and disseminating information more effectively, also due to the influence of Uranus, but that's for another video. We can simply call this time the start of mass media through mass-printed materials, i.e. books, pamphlets, letters, etc. The next conjunction was in and around 1891, and this started the mass media era of visual and audio media, radio, film, television, and all digital media. It builds upon ideas that had already existed or were being invented, but the mass proliferation of media and narrative beginning at the start of the 20th century has fundamentally shaped humanity and our culture and society to this day, and that is the Neptune and Pluto influence. We saw film, magazine, and radio, which all pushed the same stories to millions of people, instead of just sharing stories and culture more locally. The first modern film shown to the public was the Lumiere brothers' short films in Paris in 1895, just a few years after the exact conjunction of Neptune and Pluto. Film and cinema took off during the 1910s and 20s in America especially, and we can see the influence of Neptune being in Leo here, just for as an aside, the start of America's idolization of the film star, and even the name, the Roaring Twenties, has lion qualities. But back to Neptune and Pluto, the Neptune-Pluto influence can be seen in the progressive era of the United States, from about the 1890s to the 1920s. During this time, mass printing of magazines became cheap and easy, Advertising led to a steep drop in price for magazines, and so their accessibility soared, a form of mass media. Pluto brings up issues with corruption. During this time, many journalists called muckrakers started exposing corruption in business, politics, social ills, working conditions, and more through magazines to hundreds of thousands of people. This led to public outcry and many reforms in labor laws. The modern era of mass media being used to alter the public's perception, leading to institutional and political change, had started. Exposing corruption and instigating changes and transformation through mass media is very much Pluto and Neptune. Also, this time brought about many changes in people's perceptions and beliefs around religion, especially Christianity. The efficiency movement came about and aimed to modernize all aspects of society and believed that science and technology were the grand solutions to society's flaws. Major institutions changed and grew powerful, including medicine, education, industry, and banking, all using mass media to help push their agendas. A split in beliefs emerged between fundamentalists and modernist Christian thought leaders as well, and other schools of thought emerged attempting to remedy the split between science and religion and better understand the individual's place in both a modernizing society as well as spiritually as a whole. Rudolf Steiner developed anthroposophy, for example.
You don't tell your pappy how to cut the electorate. We ain't one at a time in here. We're mass communicating.
Oh, yes. That's a powerful new force.
Shake a leg, Junior.
Radio also took off, especially in the 1930s, but starting in the 1910s and 20s as well. Later, starting in the 1950s, we saw the home television become a staple in most homes. We can see how the process behind film and radio combined into one device, which made it more accessible to everyone in their home. TV and radio became the primary or the only source of information for a larger and larger percentage of the population. People were all getting the same entertainment and narratives from the news, programs, etc. We can see the influence of Neptune through an equalizing and dissolving of uniqueness and diversity of thought. Television has been described as a homogenizing agent, a very Neptunian word. The main components of the modern computer were invented in the late 50s and early 60s. MOSFET, integrated circuits, and the first supercomputer were built. Also, the beginning of the internet with ARPANET. This period of scientific breakthroughs and inventions was due to the influence of Uranus conjunct Pluto in and around 1966. But I bring it up here because the computer and internet, the World Wide Web as well, are modern staples in every home, and a fundamental part of mass media today. The Uranus-Pluto conjunction laid the groundwork for those breakthroughs, and which both became household essentials starting in the early 90s with the Uranus-Neptune conjunction. This continued and evolved throughout the 2000s while Neptune was in Aquarius, taking the breakthroughs and inventions of the Uranus-Pluto conjunction and spreading it to the masses. The internet and digital media are the number one influencer of human perception today, and the influence of Uranus starting new cycles with Neptune and Pluto has helped build upon the larger influence of mass media started at the Neptune-Pluto conjunction in and around 1891. Something to note is that after their conjunction at the end of the 19th century, starting the current cycle of mass media we are in today, Neptune and Pluto remained in the sextile aspect configuration for much of the 20th century and into the 21st. This explains how mass media has had such a powerful influence for so long, for good and ill. What is started at the conjunction is developed during the sextile. With those two in sextile for almost a century, it allowed for rapid and massive development of mass media to what it is today. The entire world being connected and sharing narratives and sharing cultural and spiritual perceptions and values.